Imagine this, it's a quiet morning and you're sipping your coffee, scrolling through another stream of digital noise until you see it. A dog, just an ordinary Labrador, sitting silently at a child's grave. It hasn't moved for days. No leash, no owner, just silent presence. It waits as if it knows. And in that moment, a shiver trails your spine, not because of superstition, but because something in you remembers. Not logically, but somewhere deeper, beyond language, beneath your waking mind. Something ancient. A connection. A prophecy. What if our dogs know something we don't? What if their companionship is not mere biological happenstance, but destiny? The famed American mystic Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, once hinted at animals as messengers, guardians, and even karmic partners. His vision suggested that in the future, dogs would not only become integral to our emotional survival but would emerge as spiritual sentinels, signaling a radical shift in consciousness. Could that time be now? This is not about folklore or pet adoration. This is about a deep undercurrent that pulses beneath the surface of modern life, a philosophical truth hidden in plain sight. Look around, as society splinters under the weight of isolation, technological addiction, and existential doubt, the rise of dogs as emotional lifelines has become nearly mythic. Mental health professionals prescribe dog companionship for PTSD, depression, anxiety. These creatures are not just comforting, they're anchoring. In a fragmented world, they are becoming the glue. Nietzsche once asked, "What does your conscience say? You shall become the person you are." But how does one become when so much of modern identity is outsourced to devices and fractured ideologies? Dogs don't theorize identity, they reflect it. In their eyes, we see ourselves without performance or pretense. In their loyalty, a mirror of what we long to be. In their presence, something ineffably sacred unfolds. Could they be living archetypes, embodying what Carl Jung described as the self, a unification of conscious and unconscious, animal and divine? Edgar Cayce foresaw a world where animals, particularly dogs, would evolve in purpose. He spoke of reincarnation, of karmic relationships where humans and animals return together across lifetimes. He believed dogs, in many cases, choose us not randomly but cosmically. Imagine that your dog has known you before. It doesn't simply learn your moods. It remembers your soul. Modern science calls it attachment behavior. Cayce called it soul contract. And while those terms may seem worlds apart, the emotional weight is eerily aligned. In 1934, Cayce declared, "The spirit of animals will be recognized as part of the same creative force, returning in cycles to assist humanity." What if their growing prominence in human mental and emotional healing is not a trend, but a prophecy unfolding? As Aldous Huxley observed, the more powerful and original a mind, the more it will incline towards the religion of solitude. Perhaps that's why dogs are so often found at the feet of the brokenhearted, the lonely, the seekers. They accompany those who drift beyond the social currents, not as pets, but as guardians of inner transformation. They are not here to fix our world. They are here to stand with us while it breaks. And break it is. But in the rubble, new symbols emerge. Dogs waiting patiently at empty hospital doors. Dogs leading the blind through war zones of modernity. Dogs howling when their humans die, as if the veil between dimensions briefly tears. There is something primal happening, something prophetic. In a time when the human psyche teeters between digital oblivion and spiritual reawakening, perhaps the question isn't why dogs are so present, but why now? Why are they stepping forward with such urgency, such depth of emotion, such haunting presence? Cayce's visions whisper the answer, and this is only the beginning. They watch us, not just with the dumb loyalty we once projected onto them, but with a silence so aware it defies explanation. A German shepherd stares at a man trembling on the edge of a panic attack. No one else notices, but the dog does. It walks over, places its head on his knee, and in that small gesture, without language or logic, the man's breathing slows. What did the dog know? Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and author of Man's Search for Meaning, believed that our deepest need is not pleasure, not power, but purpose. And when a person loses their sense of purpose, when despair hollows out the core, even the strongest mind fractures. Dogs somehow offer meaning without a single word. They offer it through presence, through a gaze that says, "You still matter, even now, especially now." Edgar Cayce's prophecies are unsettling in their quiet insistence that the lines between human and animal are not fixed. In trance readings, Cayce alluded to companions from other realms who take animal form not by accident but by intent. These are not shapeshifters from myth, they are energies bound by affection and karma choosing the form best suited to reach us. And dogs, he suggested, are the chosen form in this age of psychic crisis. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free, that our lives demand meaning, yet the universe offers no blueprint. The result? Anguish. But what if the blueprint has arrived not as a book, a doctrine, or a political system, but as a being? A dog who finds you when your life is unraveling. Who stays even when you believe yourself unworthy. Who becomes, quietly, the reason you don't jump. It's easy to scoff at mysticism. Yet harder to explain why dogs appear in our darkest moments, not metaphorically, but literally. Why did a golden retriever dig for 3 days straight through earthquake rubble to pull out a child's hand? Why do dogs whine inconsolably the moment their owner dies, even across cities, even miles away? Science calls it olfaction, bonding, evolution. But somewhere in your bones, you know it's more than that. Arthur Schopenhauer once observed that compassion for animals is intimately associated with goodness of character. But dogs, unlike humans, don't need to cultivate compassion. They embody it. They don't theorize suffering, they sit beside it. Without condition. Without reward. And Cayce's warnings that humanity would need these spirits to endure the coming storms suddenly don't sound so strange when you look around. Mass loneliness. Climate trauma. The slow unraveling of meaning itself. In this context, the surge in dogs not just as companions but as helpers begins to look less like trend and more like manifestation. Therapy dogs in courtrooms. Service dogs detecting seizures before they occur. Rescue dogs leading search teams where technology fails. Even dogs in hospice rooms curled against the dying as if they are ferrying them across. What strange knowing is this? Cayce predicted the rise of soul animals, those who carry frequencies that humans can no longer access unaided. In his model, these beings have waited for their time. Their emergence now, during what many call the Anthropocene collapse, is not coincidental. It's the return of an ancient pact. A pact to guide, not with answers, but with presence. Aldous Huxley wrote, after silence, that which comes nearest to expressing the inexpressible is music. But perhaps he missed one thing, the gaze of a dog. It too expresses the inexpressible. It doesn't need syllables or syntax. It speaks directly to the soul, reminding you of something you forgot. You are not alone. You never were. As the world fractures into pixels, algorithms, and artificial emulations of life, it is the dog beating with warm blood and ancient knowing that reminds us of the real. And maybe, just maybe, Edgar Cayce saw this coming. But what if the prophecy goes further? What if these animals are not just healers but harbingers? What happens when the guide begins to signal something is about to change? What happens when dogs stop simply comforting and begin warning? The shift may already be happening. They're barking at nothing. You've seen it, maybe late at night, maybe when the house is still. The dog lifts its head, ears tense, eyes fixed on something you can't see. Then it growls. Or whimpers. Or stares into a corner, unblinking. You tell yourself it's nothing. A noise outside. A shadow. The wind. But deep down, something shifts. What if the dog sees? Edgar Cayce spoke often about the veil, that thin boundary between physical and spiritual realms. In his readings, he suggested that animals, especially dogs, possess a heightened sensitivity to subtle vibrations and entities beyond human perception. Not because they are supernatural, but because they are natural in the deepest, truest sense. Uncorrupted by abstract thought or ego, dogs remain attuned to a spectrum of reality long closed off to the human psyche. In a world obsessed with logic and control, the idea that animals perceive what we cannot is disconcerting. But as Carl Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And perhaps that's what makes the dog's vision so terrifying. It sees the soul. Not metaphorically. Literally. Reports are increasing, dogs reacting violently in serene spaces, refusing to enter certain rooms, whining in synchronicity during lunar eclipses. This isn't mere superstition, it's a pattern. In Cayce's language, the watchers are awakening. Dogs were once guardians of thresholds in myth and in mystery. The ancient Egyptians saw Anubis, the jackal-headed god, as the protector of the dead. In Greek mythology, Cerberus guarded the gates of Hades. Always dogs. Always at the door between worlds. Could it be that our domestic pets, in their own silent way, are returning to this archetypal role? Not merely pets, but threshold keepers? In Cayce's vision of the coming age, dogs would become increasingly sensitive to vibratory shifts, the emotional and spiritual disturbances of a world in flux. They would begin to act out not because of poor training, but because something is arriving, something we refuse to acknowledge. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "Invisible threads are the strongest ties." And perhaps these threads now stretch between species, linking our fate with those who do not speak our language, but understand our silence. Dogs sense storms before they hit, earthquakes before they rumble, death before it comes. What else are they sensing now? Owners report strange changes. Dogs waking at the same hour every night and staring out the window. Dogs howling in cities where they never howled before. Dogs standing between their humans and seemingly empty doorways, defensive, alert, afraid. These are not isolated incidents. They form a rising wave of psychic agitation. And the closer we move toward global reckoning, ecological, psychological, spiritual, the more the dogs respond. Cayce predicted a shift in collective consciousness, one in which humanity would be forced to confront its own spiritual bankruptcy. But he also claimed that certain animals would aid in the lifting of veils. Perhaps the dog's growing agitation is not random. Perhaps it is signal. Imagine a future where dogs no longer simply bark to warn of intruders, but of ruptures in spiritual energy, where their presence in homes is not just for comfort, but for protection against forces most humans have forgotten how to name. In this light, a barking dog is no longer an annoyance. It's a message, one we ignore at our peril. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that existence precedes essence, that we define ourselves through our actions. But dogs operate in reverse. Their essence radiates through every action. And now that essence is becoming more alert, more charged. They are reacting to a world increasingly out of balance. And not just reacting, but intervening. You might ask, why would they care? Why would they bother? Because if Cayce is right, and dogs are indeed souls returning with us through lifetimes, then their love isn't a product of training. It's a vow. A contract made long ago to guard us not only from harm, but from forgetting who we are. But even that protection has limits. What happens when the dogs are warning us, and we still refuse to listen? What happens when the guardians grow restless? The signs are here. The prophecy is moving, and the dogs are beginning to act. There comes a moment, subtle yet unmistakable, when the dog no longer looks at you with pure adoration, but with concern. It's a gaze not of submission, but of mourning, as if your dog knows something you don't, something about what's coming, something about you. We like to imagine ourselves as the caretakers, the dominant species, the ones in control. But lately, if you've really been paying attention, there's a quiet reversal taking place. The dogs are watching us more than ever, studying us with a depth that defies domestication. They wait by our bedsides. They interrupt our endless scrolling. They nudge us when we disassociate. And sometimes they simply stare, as if trying to remind us of something we were supposed to remember. Edgar Cayce spoke often about humanity losing its spiritual compass. But he also spoke of helpers, living beings who would emerge in quiet forms to help us navigate the moral and psychic darkness. He referred to these animals as returning intelligences, souls bonded to ours before time, coming back not just to walk beside us, but to pull us back from the edge. Sounds like fantasy until you see it. A man crippled by grief begins to function again, only after a rescue but refuses to leave his side. A child with autism, silent for years, suddenly speaks her first words to a service dog. A suicidal teenager doesn't go through with the plan, not because of an intervention, but because his dog laid its head on his chest and wouldn't move. This is not therapy. This is intervention from another dimension of loyalty. As Viktor Frankl wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Dogs confront us with this very challenge. They do not shield us from despair, they walk into it with us. They choose us at our most broken. And maybe that's why they've become more restless, more alert, more urgent. The crisis of meaning Cayce foresaw is now upon us, and the dogs are no longer content to be silent passengers. They are initiating something. In esoteric circles, there is talk of frequency shifts, the idea that the Earth's vibration is increasing, and with it, the emotional and spiritual pressure on every living being. Cayce alluded to this subtly, calling it a quickening of energies that would unearth suppressed emotions, karmic wounds, and long-ignored truths. During this period, he warned those most tuned to vibration would react first. Dogs are reacting. They are absorbing not just their owner's emotions, but collective trauma. Rescue centers report dogs developing anxiety symptoms en masse: restlessness, pacing, vocalization, refusal to eat, not due to abuse, but seemingly in resonance with the human world's psychological collapse. They are becoming empaths for a species teetering on existential fatigue. Arthur Schopenhauer once observed that the assumption that animals are without rights and the illusion that our treatment of them has no moral significance is a positively outrageous example of Western crudity and barbarity. If only he could see now how those very animals are the ones treating us. Carl Jung described the shadow as the unconscious aspects of the self that the ego refuses to acknowledge. And perhaps that's why dogs unsettle us now. They are responding to the shadow rising both in individuals and in humanity at large. They don't recoil from it. They watch it. They feel it. They try to protect us from it. But protection without transformation is futile. As Cayce's prophecies deepen, they begin to suggest something more intense. That the dogs are not merely warning us, they are preparing us for a shift not just in external circumstances, but in internal architecture. For the disintegration of who we thought we were, and the emergence of something older, something sacred. The dog doesn't look at your Instagram persona, it looks at your soul. And lately it's starting to look worried. So the question arises, what is it that they see? What is it that they feel approaching? And more hauntingly, what are they trying to tell us before it's too late? Perhaps the time for companionship is ending. Perhaps the time for prophecy has begun. There's a strange thing that happens when a dog dies. For a moment, the world pauses. Not outwardly, cars still move, clocks still tick. But something internal halts. A vacuum forms in the psyche, as if a soul tether has been severed. The grief that follows isn't just loss. It's disorientation, as though something sacred has left your orbit. Many dismiss it as mere sentimentality, but Cayce saw it as confirmation. In his trance readings, he spoke of animals, particularly dogs, acting as stabilizers of the spirit. He believed that in many lifetimes, dogs don't just follow us. They bind us to the earth when we've grown too fractured, too dispersed. When one dies, a part of that energetic scaffolding collapses. And if we were truly paying attention, we'd understand. Their departure often marks a threshold. Ask anyone who has loved and lost a dog. It's more than the absence of fur, or bark, or ritual. It's the sudden and chilling feeling that something protective is gone. You feel exposed, like a portal has closed, or opened. Jean-Paul Sartre, the eternal existentialist, claimed hell is other people. But he never accounted for the dog. The dog is the antithesis of hell. It is the sacred witness. Never imposing, never retreating. In a world where most relationships demand performance, the dog requires only truth. And when it leaves, it takes with it a level of acceptance most humans will never offer. This is where the prophecy tightens. Cayce's visions indicated that certain dogs were more than just companions, they were transitional beings linked to soul timing. He described beings who take form to walk with us until the appointed hour, and while his language was often vague, the implications were not. These dogs don't just arrive into your life. They arrive at the moment you need anchoring the most. And they leave when the next phase of your evolution demands it. You felt it, haven't you? That uncanny moment when your dog's eyes lock with yours and something unspoken passes between you. Something not of this world. And you realize they're not just reading your body. They're reading your blueprint, the energetic map of your traumas, your longing, your latent potential. Aldous Huxley once wrote, "Experience is not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you." And this is precisely where dogs intervene. Not to change fate, but to alter your response to it. To build resilience, not through speech, but through unwavering, visceral presence. Now we begin to see the larger arc of Cayce's prophecy that in the times of global spiritual crisis, when technology has replaced touch, when solitude has mutated into alienation, when the soul no longer speaks, dogs would rise not as pets, but as spiritual allies. They would accompany us not just emotionally, but metaphysically across a threshold of human transformation. Consider the rising number of stories whispered across forums and hospital corridors, dogs who bark frantically minutes before seizures. Dogs who lead people away from danger with surgical precision. Dogs who curl against dying bodies and refuse to leave even after death. There's something almost monastic in their commitment. As if they were trained not by humans but by something older. This is not instinct. It's mission. Carl Jung believed in synchronicity, the idea that meaningful coincidences arise from the collective unconscious. What if your meeting with your dog wasn't chance, but synchronicity activated by need? What if their entrance and exit from your life mark not mere stages of aging, but spiritual epics within your journey? And what if, in their dying, they are passing you a torch? The emotional unraveling we experience at their passing may not just be grief. It may be a spiritual inheritance, a transfer of presence. They stood watch. They guarded your awakening. And now they are gone, so you may step into what comes next. But what has come next? If Cayce is to be believed, their departure is not the end, it is the opening of a door. One that leads to confrontation with the soul's true calling. And one that may already be opening for all of us. You wake up one night, heart racing, breath shallow, and you're not sure why. Everything is silent. Except your dog, who's sitting at the foot of the bed, staring at you. Not with panic. Not with confusion. But with something ancient. Something knowing. You sit up. The air feels different. And in that moment, you understand the change has begun. Edgar Cayce once said, "The signs are all around you if you but see with the eyes of the spirit." Dogs have always seen that way. And now they are asking us to do the same. The prophecy is not about dogs becoming gods. It's not about worship or myth or mythologizing our pets beyond reason. It's about remembering the covenant we broke when we crowned ourselves above all things. Cayce foresaw a reckoning not just of climate or politics, but of consciousness. And in that great upheaval, it would not be kings or prophets who would guide us. It would be the lowly, the loyal, the ones who never stopped watching. Dogs, they don't just mirror us, they reflect a version of us untouched by shame, by power, by fear. In their eyes, we are reminded of the person we were before the world demanded a mask. And as this collective mask begins to fall, the prophecy comes into full view. The dogs were never just beside us. They were ahead of us, waiting. Nietzsche warned, "If you gaze long enough into the abyss will gaze back into you." What he didn't say is that, if you are lucky, your dog will be sitting beside you when it happens. And in that gaze, you will not find despair, but grounding. Not instruction, but invitation. Invitation into the deepest and most terrifying question of all. Who are you without your wounds? Who are you when no one is watching, except a creature who has always watched and never judged? This is the final function of the prophecy. Not comfort, not warning, but revelation. Dogs are not here to fix us. They are here to witness us. And in that witnessing, they anchor the moment when we begin to rise, not as gods, not as tyrants, but as something humbler and far more powerful. Beings capable of compassion without condition. Look around. Do you see the patterns now? The synchronicities? The moment you were about to give up, and your dog nudged your hand. The decision you were about to make, and their sudden bark broke the silence. These are not interruptions. They are oracles. Because prophecy doesn't always arrive with thunder or fire. Sometimes, it arrives with fur and silence. Cayce foresaw a moment when humanity would be given a final choice. To evolve in consciousness or perish in disconnection. He said this moment would not come through war or flood, but through an internal reckoning. A moment when each person must look within and ask, "What have I become? And what still waits within me to be born?" In that moment, many will fall into despair, but some will remember, because the dogs will remind them, with a look, with a breath, with a simple act of presence that says, "You're still here, you're still worthy, now rise." Viktor Frankl believed that meaning could be found even in the darkest suffering. That love, even when all else is stripped away, could still be chosen. Dogs choose love, every single time. And that may be the real prophecy, that the only way forward is not through conquest or intellect or even survival. It is through unconditional presence. And if we dare to follow them, these silent prophets in fur, we may find ourselves not just surviving the coming storm, but transformed by it. Not because they saved us, but because they showed us how to save ourselves. So the next time your dog stares at you longer than seems normal, pause. The message is being delivered. Are you listening?